so I'll be going back and forth. I have to be honest, this is a little awkward for me because I don't ever feel like I'm necessarily like an expert at anything, but I think the fact that this is happening during Workshoppy time is perfect because I think we'll all have things to contribute as we work through Alchemer. And so before we started, I just wanted to talk about like the intention of these times together so that we're all on the same page and we're having the same conversation. But essentially, we're going to work together as a group to support an shared clarity about the software program, Alchemer. And what we're going to do, I am not an expert. I believe that the intention is, from Wendy's point of view, is that we will go through so that we can start to understand some of the capacities of Alchemer. And correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy. But as we go through it, you're going to have things that you're going to bring up or tricks that you've learned. So we're all going to collectively come together and kind of have, by the end of it, hopefully a better shared understanding and insight into what Alchemer can do together. And so with that being said, I don't want to go through and just be like, and then you do this, and then this feature, and that feature, and that, because I don't think that's a good use of our time, because I think at this point, everyone knows for the most part how to build a survey, and that's not the intention. The intention is to, like, by the end of this, have a better understanding of how powerful it is and what we can do with it. So if that's okay with everybody, I cannot see everyone's faces. If anyone shout out or put in the chat if that doesn't sound good to you, or if you have other thoughts.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
Great.
I think it sounds great.
Okay. So I've put together I wanted to make sure that there were certain things that we for sure covered, and we'll see how far we get. I understand that this came up during the staff meeting last week, and the thought was that if there was extra things, we can cover the more advanced features over in the retreat. But so I've got a long list of stuff, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to all of it today, but we will see. Anything we don't cover, we can do a 102 section. Today's 101, we'll do 102 later, if that sounds good. Wendy, you're the only one I see, so if there's if you
I'll
can
make
see
sure
everybody,
I'm like really smiley and supportive. Yeah.
Yeah, or at least like raise
great.
your hand or pause if somebody has something going on, or if you see somebody looking confused, be like, Pat's looking confused,
What
or
the heck is
not
she
to pick on
talking
Pat.
about?
But I'm going to put this in our SPS logistics file when we're finished with it. We can add to it as we go along. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that there was quite a bit of help features and options available out there, including Alchemer University, which is a whole host of different training programs that you can go into. These might be, there's basic training is probably the one that I thought would be the most useful. There's other, I didn't even start looking at these because I tend to never use these, but it is available if we want to use it. Alchemer support is probably where you'll find yourself more often than not. These are the like individual tasks, like you need to know how to do an email campaign. So we're going to go to the search thing and we're going to type in email campaign and it's going to come up here. So then you have different articles and these are great. This is how you learn how to do anything. So if you don't know how to do something, your default can be to come here. And then I wanted to make sure that you also knew that the live support option was available. These folks are great. Every single time I've called, it's wonderful. There's like usually a 5 to 10 minute wait time for these guys, but they're awesome. They are responsive. They make sure that your questions are answered in timely ways. They are super knowledgeable. They follow up with an email if they can't find it. And if there's a feature that they know that they don't have, they'll take your input and plug it up the system so that they can potentially change their software program. So if you can't find something or if there's a feature you want, it's always good to give them that feedback because it may end up down the line later on that multiple people have that issue and they want to add it to the system. I think I saw Emily's hand up.
Yeah, I have a quick question actually. So when we say we're to go ask for some live support, which name would we put in the form field? Would we do Wendy's name? Would we do SPS? What's the protocol there?
Yeah, I added a little note about that. Thank you for asking that question. They will not help you unless your name is in that that box. So I listed how to do that. So if you do need to call, here's the number to call. You need to change the name, and let's just do it together really quick so you can see how to do it, because it is helpful. Okay, so if you, no, not here. Sorry, this is how you find the number. You go down to your no, show additional support options, and then there's search documentation training. So this is the help button here. Over here in the S, where it says profile and settings, this is where it says SPS. So I would change it to Afton Lynch. Afton's fine. It just has to say it because they're gonna, when you call them, they're gonna want an access ID, which is this number here, but they won't help you unless you say your name is whatever it is. So that's how you do it. And then remember to change it back when you're done.
Wow, that's an important point. Thanks, Afton. Tedious, but I guess that's how we're saving thousands of dollars by sharing the account.
And they're all cool with it. They're like, yeah, one time I called and I forgot to change it. And they're like, you need to change it. Call back in a second. Just change it and then call me back. Like they know the drill. So,
Oh, that's nice.
Pat, go ahead. Yeah, I think you had Pat.
Right,
Pat, you had a
so
question.
if they send an email, they'll send it to Wendy, so you have to let Wendy know that to expect a follow-up, because it still has to be Wendy's email, or do you change the email too? I don't think we can
Don't
change the email.
Yeah, don't change the email. They'll send it to Wendy and Wendy will forward it to you, which is what we've done in the past. You may not remember that, Wendy, but that is what you did.
I tend to forward lots of things. So yeah, no worries. And is that for both? We have two. This is our main account. We also have info at whatever, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the first thing we're going to talk about, signing in.
Okay, great. Because
So,
then that
yeah.
and that, just so folks know, emails that go to the info@strategicpreventionsolutions.com account go to those of us who have that inbox, which includes, I think at this point, it's me, Yvonne, I think you're on there. Is it just me and you now, or do both Brittany and Lexi also get them?
Layla's on it as well.
And Layla. So you, Layla, me, and Brittany and Lexi? No,
I don't
just
think
you,
I get
Layla.
those. Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of save your inbox. Okay, so me, Layla, and Yvonne are your info people.
I'm just going to search Alchemer support. Yeah, so I'm going to show you what they sent me. You can see. Can you see this? So they sent it to me directly. So I think at some point I said, can you send this to my address? So I gave them often a SPS. Like we had a long, you see how we're like, there was a long chat back and forth between us because we were trying to figure something out. And they were great. I think at some point, I maybe gave them my email address when I was talking to them on the phone directly. So we had quite a bit of back and forth. This is during the Safe Sport survey, but you can see they're really helpful. So I don't shy. My point in bringing this up is don't shy away from calling them. It's sometimes quicker than trying to figure it out. Or if I'm out of town or something, you don't know the answer, then call them. They're great. Before I move on, any other questions about support or help? Okay. So there, like you said, there's two accounts. Wendy's the main account, which is why when you log into them, they look different. Wendy's is, I can't remember what I must be under Wendy's right now. This is the Wendy strategicpreventionsolutions.com. This is the admin account. So you have extra features over here on the left. The other one doesn't have these. And it doesn't, you don't really need to do anything with this stuff. It's all about like setting up the account, and you'll mostly be concerned with the settings in your individual survey, not necessarily Alchemer or profile and settings. But you do need to know how to change the name so that you can get support if you need it.
Well, and Afton, I think that deserves a little bit of an underscore because we've purposefully kind of, what's the word? Directed any admin level changes. So like the way our default surveys look, our color scheme, our logo, those kinds of like settings on the account, we don't want all of us to be changing. So only Afton should be changing those things. But you can of course change your individual survey like Afton just said. So yeah, don't change the account things.
Yeah. And you'll know, like it's all over here. if I were on the other account, some of this wasn't even, this stuff down here isn't even visible. And I wanted to show you this third account also, that so you knew it was here. We have a guest account option, which is info@SPS Connect, which is where you can create an account. And if you want, I can show you how to do it. It seems a little too detailed at this point right now to go into showing you how to actually add it because it's a little convoluted. But you can create a survey and then add it to this guest account so that you can give a client login information, and it's in the SPS Logistics password and software account information, so that they can go in and they can do like the filtering and create reports and kind of mess with the survey. They don't actually get to mess with the build side of it, but they get to see the results. And right now, the surveys that we have are for the ITK E2 Klotzine and the Let Me Run surveys for A and DVSA. I don't think there's other surveys in there right now, but just so that you know it is available. If you wanted to, if your client wanted to have a little bit more detailed information and to be able to filter out things themselves, you can add it to this. And that might be a 102. If we want to talk about that, I'll get your feedback on that. But that could be something that we could talk about later, adding. But just so you know, it's here.
And it is pretty robust as far as clients having access to their own data, and definitely falls in line with our ethics as a research company, you know, to make sure that our clients have access to their data and can use it for their own reporting. And like Afton said, messing around with their own visuals and charts and whatever else they're doing. That is why we set that up.
And this is not the hashtag prevention, by the way, just so you know, this is not the same password, obviously, because we give our clients this information. So if there are not any questions about signing in, we'll start creating a survey.
Afton, I actually have one other question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you just clarify or talk real quick just about the roles? And again, going back to like your role with Alchemer is different than like Pat's role with Alchemer, and anyone else, honestly. And that like not all of us are going to be going in and creating surveys, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess let's talk about that. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second so we can chat about that. Do you I think that you all have the capacity to create surveys, so I think it's up to your individual projects, the extent to which you want to spend time creating surveys, or having Emily and I come in and do some of the filtering for you all, or actually, if you have it in a Word document, Emily and I can come in and create the survey for you in Alchemer, but we can talk about that a little bit. Do folks have thoughts about that? Go ahead, Pat.
I think it's good for everybody to know this, because what if I need to make a change? The client says, oh, I had this last minute change and Emily's out ill or on vacation or just for whatever reason not available. I think that's where this is, you know, even if Emily's doing the bulk of it and maybe all of it, you know, is my goal. One, to know the options, which we're talking about, so we know how to, you know, think about what we can do and talk about different strategies around it, but also to be able to be, you know, a backup in case Emily's not available and someone else isn't available. So that's
Yes, no, I didn't say that to imply that we were keeping information from anyone. It's about workflow and the cost of people's time. So we you know, a couple of years ago restructured our positions so that our research associate support staff, like Afton and Emily, intentionally are supposed to carry the heaviest load of creating and maintaining online surveys, so that project leads like Pat and Brittany and Lexi and I are not creating surveys, because we are way too expensive to get in there and just create line by line surveys. It's much more efficient and helpful from a business perspective to have Afton and Emily be the main people in surveys, creating, fussing with them. But at the same time, like Afton said, like we all need to have some proficiency with it to be able to request things, which I think is probably the aim of some of the conversation today, so that we know what to ask for and what we want out of the surveys and how to use them and how to interface with Alchemer in a good way. But I do think it's helpful to have this kind of role clarification up front because it will impact how you engage with what Afton's going to say. So like the point is not to have us all be experts at Alchemer. The point is for Afton and Emily to be experts at Alchemer and the rest of us to know how to use Alchemer and to know enough about the features to make requests of Afton and Emily for the work that we need done. That's kind of the intention. I just wanted to clarify that role as we go into this, so we don't all feel like we have to know everything at the same level as Afton and Emily. Does that make sense to folks? Does that deserve any more clarification, or is that a-okay?
I'm glad you brought that up because I actually didn't know that we had the switch a few years back. This probably was before I joined the team. And it does make a lot of sense because sometimes creating surveys really can be very tedious, time consuming, and
Yeah.
just like, it takes some time. And like you said, when it comes to like the price point of it, it just makes a lot more sense. And yeah, I'm glad you brought it up and framed it the way you did and how we're supportive and everything like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, you both are better at it. I mean, like there's this, and we support your professional development. Like if Afton, and you have done more training, Afton, with Alchemer, and we'll continue to support you both in getting more training with Alchemer to be the experts at Alchemer. And just, yeah, you do a nice job with it. Yeah, and you love Great See, right? It's like win-win for all of us.
Nerd alert. Just kidding. Just kidding, Emily. I love creating surveys too. Okay, so I'll go back. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think that'll help us moving forward too as we go through some of this. There's certain things that I may just kind of gloss over really quick because it's not like how you do it is not necessarily important. And like I know that all of you can build a survey. It's just making sure that we are all understanding what's available and what we can do with it. Because there are some things, even as I was prepping for this workshop time today, I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was an option. In fact, we should have used that on one of our, which I'll get into in a second, and I didn't use that. So silly me. Okay, let me get back to where I was. All right, so I wanted to make sure that you knew that we could create themes. And if you have a client that you're going to have a lot of surveys for, you can create it where? Design library.
Or Afton will create it, just to clarify.
Afton.
You
I
send
can create
Afton
it, yeah.
the colors and the files, and she will create the theme. That's a good
So
example.
so yes, you can see that there's some that are already created for you, and this saves you a lot of time. You don't have to go through and select all the colors. So we're not going to do that. I just want to know that it's an option to create a theme for a survey. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when you go to create new, there's surveys, forms, polls, quizzes, payment form, 360 review. Those are the exact same. It's just called different. And I could not discern any difference between a form and a survey other than it is called a form. So if we were to create a form test, it's like, why do they call it that? It changes at form settings instead of survey settings is the only difference I could see. So all the questions are the same. Everything is the exact, unless somebody else knows, everything looks the same.
It totally does.
So, yeah, well, there you go. I'm gonna put this over here so I can see where I am. So there's also research library. Where is it? Here. You can create, so global questions. I actually didn't see the difference between this and creating a template survey. So for example, Wendy and I just did a strategic planning session in Anchorage, and afterwards we wanted to send out a survey to ask general questions about how we did, what can we do different. And so that's a really good example of a template that you can create that's ready to go, and then you can modify it based on your whatever I ask. So I created a post-event template, here that says, you know, maybe you don't need to say what day they attended, and you can edit it if it was Thursday or Friday or whatever. You can create a matrix for them to understand, to get input on how satisfied people were. So essentially you can, when you build your survey, you could just have it pull from this template and just add it to your survey, and then you can edit each of the questions. So I just like created it so that we had it, and then put in brackets to where you might want to consider changing, obviously. But that's a way that we can save time. So that's available. If you can think of other surveys that are very similar that we're using over and over again, I don't know what those could be, but you might have some, reach out to me and I can build some of those and make sure that they're in our library so that we can save time and not have to rebuild the same survey. Like if, for example, the capacity assessment that we just did, let's say there were 2 states that wanted to do an online capacity assessment, like why would we have created 2 surveys for that? We could have just created a template and then saved a lot of time. Does anyone have any questions before we move on?
I think Brittany raised a good point in the chat about that you could do templates for reports too.
That's a great point. Emily, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I know in some cases we might have like an evaluation question bank. For example, Stretch, we have, you know, like 10, 15 questions that folks can choose from. Would it be more prudent to create almost like a library with all of those different questions, or does Alchemer have an evaluation, or I'm sorry, a question bank type space? Would that just be the global questions or custom?
Yeah, and there's another way. I'd have to jog my memory, but man, that's not it. I think there's another way too, where you can create templates for individual questions, which might be more appropriate. You can also create a template for individual pages that you want to add. Like, let's say there's a type of question that has like, or a page with like 6 questions that are all the same you want to add. You can add that whole page, or you can add individual questions. Let me go in here so I can jog my memory.
I like
on how
that.
to do
It's
that.
almost like if you have knowledge-based questions or increase in behavior, beliefs questions, those types.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you add it in the library where we just were, research library. They have some stock questions you can add as well. But it looks like these are already in here. I'm not sure when they were added, but so you can add, looks like our logo is added at some point. So make sure to use this as much as possible as well. Go ahead, Pat.
All right. So, Emily, are you thinking like Stretch, where we're going to have like a number of different surveys? We'll have like 10 questions that we're going to just use different combinations of. So we could do like a template for Stretch, and you can make a copy of survey, right? And then take out the ones that you don't want and say this is Stretch template, and then just remove the ones we don't want.
Okay.
And then we always have to add maybe 1 or 2. I mean, if this other thing doesn't work with that, yeah, if it's easy to copy one that doesn't have data in it, that you never put data in, maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
So while you were chatting, I just took that post event survey and I added it as a page. So all the questions added their own page. But I think you're right, Emily, you raise a really good point. If there are common questions, like somebody spent a lot of time thinking about the right way to ask a question in a survey and how to get that. If there's something that we're using over and over again, we should make sure to be including them in the library. Okay. Are there any other questions about that before we move on? Okay, so just so you're aware that if you take your mouse and hover it over each section or just before, it'll bring up an option for you to add text, media, so you can add your logo. There's also action, which we'll talk about in a second. These question library, which we were just talking about, or the question actual question type. So Alchemer offers a ton of different types of questions that you can ask. I would say 99% of the time you're not going to use them. They're just kind of fun. And in fact, you often want to think about getting too complicated because they decrease your accessibility. If somebody is blind, for example, and they cannot see and they use a screen reader, some of these questions will not work for them. And so I just wanted to remind folks that we did a how we do what we do on creating accessible surveys, and I linked it here in this document. Where we have all the links about how screen readers work and how to add alternate text or alt text, thinking about adding colors and how to do all kinds. So we've already done that. I'm not going to go over that. I just want to remind people that it's here.
Thanks for the reminder, Afton.
The also Alchemer has a great page. In fact, Lexi and I studied this page when we were learning how to create this, because we knew that our survey was going to go out to people who have visibility issues. So we wanted to make sure that they were able to access all the different types of questions that we asked. So again, this is talking about the type of question that you're choosing. Just make sure that you're choosing questions that are going to be accessible to your entire audience. And always just err on the side of caution. And we can, if we want to, go into how to add screen reader information. But I think we'll pass that and default to just Emily and I can add that for you if that time comes. Okay. Any thoughts or questions on that? Okay. So we're going to talk about page logic now. If you have a question that you want to then like funnel into, if you have a question like, are you male, female, or non-binary, or, like maybe there's a question like, are you under 18? Or are you over 18? You want everyone who answers this question to now go to a different question because you have a special surprise question waiting for them. You can add logic to it, as you probably all know, but I want to make sure you know where it is. It's under each question. And you can say, I only want people to see this after they've spent so long on the survey, or they take the survey on a certain date, or they're from this particular computer, or they're from Iraq, or they're from 99901, or all kinds of different ways that you can make sure that people only see this question. You can also make sure that when you do an email campaign, only the managers that you send it to receive this question, or so you can customize it so that it's basically however you want. It's pretty powerful. Or you can say, if they've answered the question and they've said this thing on the survey, now it sends them to this page or this question. There's, like I said, all kinds of different features here, just so that you know it's available. Only show this question to admin users, hide this question by default. After answering, hide this question. I mean, there's all kinds of like different things you can play with. Any questions about this?
I don't really have a question, but I do have a fangirl, comment that I really love the hiding items until somebody has answered it, and then it moves to the next one. It really helps with the use of like white space and readability for people taking a survey, to not have 10 questions thrown at them at once. They get one at a time fed to them, essentially, and especially on mobile devices, it's super helpful. They just go one at a time and then it's done.
Yeah, and I have this on my list to talk about later, but I think it's response settings, where if you have survey logic, you're going to want to make sure that, where is it? This is me all the time. I know it's here, but I can't remember where. I wonder if it's because I made this as a form. Oops. Sorry, apologies. No, I want the survey. Sorry, so sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna create a new one. I'm sorry.
Hey, this is why we're calling it Workshoppy time, Afton.
That's right.
I know.
No apologies. It's
Yeah.
okay.
I was like, I knew this was gonna happen. Okay. Oh, just because I'm here and I don't want to forget, you can also create a template out of the survey, and that changes it from a survey to a template. Just remember that. Like you can't send it out anymore. It's a template now. So you can create another survey from this template that you can send out, but you cannot, once you create a template, so that's not what you want to do unless you want to actually like just create a template and then use it for another survey. But this doesn't let you like get responses to your survey anymore.
And being a research company, is there any reason why we would not select, I saw a box there down below, to encrypt responses? I feel like
Yeah.
that should always be checked. We should always be encrypting responses, but I'm curious, and maybe this is another topic for another time, but why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Is there a downside to that?
What I read, and I had it on here to talk about because I don't know. I thought that the default for Alchemer was to always encrypt. This is like an extra layer of encryption, and I'm
Okay.
going to pose it back to the group to see if anyone has any more insight.
Good question. What does it mean to encrypt a response? Who's the geekiest one of us who can answer that really well?
My understanding was that all their surveys had SSL encryption. It was a default. So maybe this is something extra. As to being super nerdy and knowing the differentials in the encryption, I don't know.
Anyone know?
It looks
Uh,
like there's a button that they can view the policy for encryption from Alchemer. That's one way that that makes it a little bit different.
Okay. While we were chatting, I did find what I was looking for so long ago. Sorry. If you have page logic, you want to make sure that this is selected so that then they don't know that they've skipped a question because it doesn't go from like 7 to 9 and they'll be like, where's 8? If you're somebody like me, that would just drive you nuts. So just make sure that this dynamic numbering is selected if you have page logic on, because then it renumbers the questions as they see them. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so you have to check that with Alchemer, because I think like SurveyMonkey, which is a little simpler, it just kind of does it automatically. Also wanted to check or ask a question, check my understanding is that, does Alchemer also only save the data entered once it goes to another page? So if someone started answering questions, then got knocked out of the survey or left, will they lose those, or are they saved only when it goes to the next page?
That's a great question. You can make it so that it's called forward only. So it saves it as soon as they go to the next page.
Okay.
Or if you don't, the default is to not have it selected. There's also, since we're here.
Well, how does that work? Wait. So if you don't have it selected, what does that mean in terms of saving data?
They can go back and change their data and it's not saved until they submit the survey.
Okay, so I don't mean like not changing, but like saving. So for example, like I was advising someone on the survey who had a whole bunch of questions and open-ended questions on one page. And so my understanding, at least from and it's with SurveyMonkey, so I have SurveyMonkey is if you do that and they get halfway through or 2/3 of the way through and then get bopped out of the survey, they've lost what they entered unless they've gone on to the next page. And going on to the next page doesn't preclude you from changing it, but it kind of it saves it. So I'm just checking if that's the same with Alchemer.
I think it is. Yeah, so you're saying like if they refresh the page before they click on continue or whatever. Stop sharing.
So I think there's if you could go back to sharing actually, Afton, that helps prompt my thinking because I'm a visual person, so they help. I think this appears differently on a few different ways. Like if you do an email campaign, they're going to have their own access link. For me, what I've done with this in CDVSA, and Emily's helped me with this, is we allowed the save and continue later. And then in Alchemer, what happens is I can go in and it saves even half-filled surveys, and I can retrieve the actual link. If they tell me, or I have a name or identifier within that survey, and someone sends me an email and says, hey, I got started, I'm halfway through it, can you send me the link? Alchemer allows me to find the access in the results tab, the individual links, and I can send them that unique link.
Yeah. Totally understand that. Not my question. And I'm so sorry. I'm having trouble explaining myself. I'm filling out a survey. There's 7 questions on a particular page. I get to question 4 and there's emergency because I'm a DV agency and there's always emergency. And I leave my computer. It gets bopped out. Have I lost the content from those? Right. So when you go to the next page, it kind of logs it. And then you could return vis-a-vis the things you said, which means that we want kind of short-ish pages as a design thing.
Yeah,
and I just
point.
was double checking that Alchemer is always also functions in that way.
I think it does. I think it doesn't actually save the content in the boxes until you click the continue button and then it's saved. But I can call and ask them if there's a setting somewhere that allows it to save
I think
in
it's
real
good
time.
practice. It's good practice, like Brittany said in the chat. Like it's good practice anyways to keep it short. So per page.
And I don't think Alchemer will have that built in. I mean, it's just a retrieval thing within the web page. So the navigation allows that information to have a storage. So keeping it to 3 or 4 items within it, or telling folks there is a save and continue feature later, just make sure you navigate to the next one before you close out on the window, because sometimes providing that prompt can help. But Pat, you're totally right. If they leave the page open and they don't navigate from it, it won't be stored. And I don't think Alchemer would even be able to retrieve that for us, kind of thing. And then the forward only, I believe, just means that they cannot go backwards. But if you send them their unique link, they would be able to start from the beginning and potentially change answers. So.
Yeah, and if you're not doing an email these are things that you'll want to consider if you're not doing an email campaign. If you're doing an email campaign, like Brittany says, everyone gets their own link. They can go back and make changes later on. They can edit it. They can pick it up after they've moved on. But if you want folks to be able to take their time and come back to the survey, you could give them a toolbar at the top, and it allows you to save and continue. There's also, if you want folks to, like, say you have a daily tracking where you want somebody to, how are you feeling today? You want to ask them every day in a certain time. You can allow your survey to record new responses from the same link. I don't know what this is. Anyone know what pre-populate new response with data from last recorded responses?
If it it just pulls in their response to the previously filled out survey in place of it so that they can update it or say, yes, that's the same, next, next, next. So it would
Yeah.
just
Okay.
drag from whatever the ID is, their name or IP address.
And
Okay.
it actually is a pretty robust, there's this feature in the settings, and also on a per question basis, you can pre-populate question narrative or prompts from their answer to a previous question in the survey too, which can be very helpful if you're using big terminology or a lot of definitions where you want to remind somebody, you mentioned the following about your thoughts on XYZ. Bam, they have it right again in front of them. Now, what do you think about, ABC? I don't use it much, but it has been helpful when we have used it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's great.
And that's just within the survey. That doesn't matter about having the same IP address. It's like a different way of pre-populating.
Okay. You can also, this is an important one you'll likely use more often, which is the hide IP address, geolocation, and invite data. We did this for our Safe Sport project, which it made it really challenging because we wanted to get information about where the information was coming from so we could see differences between regions within the United States, but we didn't want to ask the question. So just make sure that if you hide this, you won't get information about where things are coming from. And this becomes important when you do your exports because you can't actually see this data until you do an export. And then for every single response that comes in, it'll have an information about where that response came from. So if you want to make sure a survey is fully anonymous, you want to make sure that you click this button. So if you're saying if you say that you're having an anonymous survey, you want to make sure that because the default is for it to not be checked.
And I'd say, having said that, you will rarely be checking this box because we hold that's part of our data protection protocols, right? Like with administering a survey, we offer a layer of protection to people filling out responses. So just having their name not be on there or like directly identifying information is also anonymous. Yeah, we could technically sleuth and find an IP address and look for where they're coming from and maybe figure out the location of somebody and then therefore Google them and figure out which one person, like I had that happen. I think I shared with you on a nightmare example with the board of directors I was on for another organization. But like they didn't have good data protection in place within their organization. So yeah, I would say the costs and benefits, like I would hope that we follow our own data protocols and management practices so that we don't have to check this box, right? We're not going to be sharing the back end of our data sets with clients for the most part, right? To run the risk of not having information that helps us clean the data in a really good way. You know what I mean? Like to me, the risk benefit, and we could discuss this at a later time, like discuss that and have a whole call just on that. But I think that, my opinion is that I would rather not check it and not run the risk of losing information that helps us have good quality data cleaning. Whatever.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
would agree because I think we
Thoughts?
can protect and we know when not to share out IP addresses with clients. Like we just remove that column when when Afton and I were trying to share data, aggregated data with Safe Sport, we certainly removed those pieces, but internally with SPS, we retain them in case we needed that extra piece, like Wendy was saying, for data cleaning. But we did not share that level of detail with the client. And that was written specifically into our contract with them as far as what we could share with them and what we needed to retain as a company to make sure we were securing the data per IRB requirements.
Yeah, I think I rarely check that one because so much of the conversation and setup is decided in the consenting and some of the other ways we design the survey. And I often actually very rarely rely on this kind of data to do certain types of things, because now with everyone using VPNs, it changes IP addresses. So even trying to use this data to look for duplicitous types of responses, it gets increasingly harder for this to actually be
Yes.
meaningful. But I generally don't check it unless there's like a lot of things. And part of it is, we were talking about this earlier with who gets shared the survey, comes down to this, is like what all data is actually included in that survey before before we talk about data access. Because yes, my clients, I want them to have all the access to their data, but there's still, like with this kind of thing where an IP address could be logged in it, there's certain parts of this that I just want to make sure are filtered. And so sometimes I'm more likely to give an extraction of raw data than to actually give access to something like this, the actual main link. So these are lots of nuanced questions. So I really appreciate this kind of conversation, and Afton and Emily, your time getting to know all the features, so that when we have conversations about how to collect data with our clients, we know all of the different things we could do and how to give them the access that they need. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, and the reality is that it's going to be impossible for Emily and I to know all of this and understand how new, like you said, how nuanced it is. It's like, wow, as I was going through this again, I was like, oh, you can do that? What? I wish I would have known that. But and that's again why I put the help and the support at the top, because and Emily or Tiana, if you're ever needing it, like use it, because they're so helpful, and they're really like, they don't make you feel stupid at all, because you're like, they're using sometimes terms and I'm like, well, I don't actually know what you're talking about, the blah 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 or whatever he said, and I was like, can you tell me in layman's terms? So they're really great, and I highly encourage you to use them if you ever have a question. So when in doubt, if the purpose of your survey is to collect information a very specific, particular way, and if you don't know if your survey settings will allow you to get it, when in doubt, call Alchemer and dig in and find out, I would say. The last thing on this page I wanted to talk about was this private data use. This creates a checkbox I think it's at the head of the survey. I actually never tested it. Anybody know if it's at the head? I imagine it would be. But essentially creates a checkbox somewhere in the survey that we can plug our own in here. But it's basically a privacy policy that somebody has to check in order to advance in the survey. I've never used it. Has anyone ever used it?
No, that's an interesting possibility to have a templated, yeah, like Brittany says, it's basically a consent form. I don't know that we should, though, because each client has their own, we have our own contract and data use agreement with each of our clients. So like it would have looked very different for Stretch than how it looks for like ANDVSA, which has access to all of their data, right? But that would be kind of nice to have a template, honestly, but I don't know that it fits our business model. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I'm just going to save it to see really quick what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if some of those extra protocols are more if you're collecting like PHI, public health information data.
Oh yeah, look at that.
It's really specific. Yeah.
And can you change the
end.
wording on that? Like I consent to having my
Yeah.
information collected and stored.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, people use Alchemer
Right here.
for huge campaigns and media blasts and gatherings. So, and for health data. So like that makes sense. They would have these features, but I don't know that we necessarily need them.
Okay. So the next thing I have on my list, I went ahead, sorry, I have to go back to build. I wanted to make sure you knew that these actions are available. I don't think I ever clicked on this ever before I started pulling this together for you all. And this was where I was like, oh, these are cool. Especially things like creating a reCAPTCHA to make sure that bots aren't completing your survey, which would save you some leg time at the end when you're doing your data cleaning. Here, that was what we were talking about earlier. If you have pre-populated questions that you want to hide, you can add those. All kinds of things. There's a page timer if you only want people to spend 5 minutes on your survey max, see how far they get. And then I did see that there's LMS, LRS Connect, and I took a peek at that, and I don't think it's connected with ours, but it's worth further exploration. I just did not have the time to dig into that. There's a payment option. They use Stripe. So I kind of played with the idea of maybe using this on our webpage. If we could include it on our webpage, have a payment there, but I thought that was too complicated. I'm not going to, sorry. It was just a little side thought. Yeah, social media, all kinds of different things. So take a look at this, spend a little more time on it.
Yeah.
I don't know what we use.
Well,
HubSpot. I don't know
Yvonne,
HubSpot.
HubSpot, we're using that as our customer relations management database. So having it connect, like if data to and from HubSpot. Yeah, so if we wanted to send like a quick survey to anybody who had purchased a workbook, for example, we will be able to sort who those people are in HubSpot, and then like Emily or Yvonne can, blast them, send out a survey to all those folks and connect it to the hub. So we wouldn't have to manually import all that contact information is what I'm reading this as. And it would just instead pull the contact info from HubSpot, send out the quick follow-up survey for anyone who purchased workbook. So we should, Yvonne, this is great to know about. Like we really should, for customer satisfaction, people who've taken any trainings, that's awesome. Then we'd have a template little survey about their experience with the workbook or trainings or toolkits. And so you wouldn't have to even recreate that. Cool.
Cool. I just made a little note to explore more. I did think some things that we might consider using are like a results chart if we wanted to show people the results of a particular question that we've asked at the end of the survey. Like if there was a staff poll that we wanted to use where we were like, I don't know, wanting to display so people could make an informed decision based on how other people were voting. I don't know. You can send people to our website at the end of it, redirect when they're done. You can make sure people get an email at the end of it. They can review their responses to change their mind, all kinds of different things. I wanted to make sure that you knew that this was there in case you wanted to add that's action. That's where that is. I'm going to pause before we go on and make sure how are people feeling? About a half hour left. I'll show you where I am in my list. You can see how far we have. Am I touching on things that you find fascinating? Is this too in the weeds for you? What do we want to do with this last half hour? Keep going? Are we good?
I find it really good.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm having like an allergy situation with my eyeball right now, but I really liked that last piece you showed, like I've done the automated before, particularly when a client wanted like a receipt. Like one of the ways we've used this with Alaska is to do end of year reporting. And so we created an automated action to email a copy of the results or whatever the submission was to the actual person submitting it for their record, as well as the funder. So I've used the automated features, but I never saw before that automated feature that would analyze from the existing. I was like, oh, that could be kind of cool to give back as people are responding, and maybe a word cloud. But then in my head, I was also like, ooh, that could be kind of dangerous too. And then I had this whole other thought go through my head of like, how are you controlling data, Brittany? That's not your job. But the risk mitigation came out and was like, ooh, that could be dangerous. So yeah, this has been really helpful. As you said, Afton, there's lots of features, and I've spent 10 years in various software and I still don't know them all. So it's really cool to actually get to see and hear them all. So thanks. I'm happy to continue too, but that's just what I had to share.
And I like Pat's question in the chat about just touching a little bit more on campaigns. If you have some
Okay.
insight for that.
I do, yeah. I'll push that up to the top and make sure that we get there.
Yeah, and
I'll do
Afton,
that
you can
next.
recount our recent experience with Idaho.
Well, I found that it's pretty common, to have people are just so busy. They just need reminders. So fortunately, they do allow you to just rebuild reminders in. So again, I just want to touch on this in case you're not familiar with it. The place that we have been hanging out mostly is this build section. You can style your survey here. You can test your survey. I come here a lot if I want to manually enter a response or test it. I didn't know that you could do this. It's always been in front of my face, but I tried it when I was working on this, and you can generate test response. So it sends it out to AI and fills out your survey for you. So you can just see what random data looks like in your survey and see if there's any errors. It tests your logic for you. It's pretty interesting.
I have one quick note on that, Afton, if I could. I have
yeah,
found
go ahead.
that as someone who has to analyze data, this is particularly useful if you want to see what kind of data possibilities you might be dealing with. So you design a survey, generate these responses, and then go into reports. And that report will show you what you could be dealing with in terms of data cleanup and reconciliation. So it also shows you how you could potentially just tweak a question to give yourself less unwieldy data when you actually have to use it. So that's one way I've used this generated test data before.
Great tip. And
I pulled up the screen so you could see the different settings. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. That third option behind this screen of inviting others to test, I use that pretty frequently with our partners. That is a nice way to share it to your partners or your clients and have them, they actually take it, and it's nice because it's coded as a test response. It's very obvious, so you don't include it in your data analysis. It actually, I think Alchemer by default doesn't include test responses if it's labeled as such, which it would be through this. And then they can also add their comments to the survey, which is really helpful.
Yeah, if we have time today, I'll show you there's a data cleaning section where you can remove all the test responses or you can filter them out. There's several different ways to do it. But it'll just pull all of these out. So even if it comes in as a test response, which I think we had one person come in as a test response for the Idaho capacity assessment. And then before we move on, I just wanted to point out this fatigue score and accessibility. If you have a bunch of images and weird random questions that like sliding scales where you have to move your mouse across, the screen reader is not going to be able to read those. So it's going to decrease your accessibility score and your little needle will come down. The fatigue score, does somebody want to talk about fatigue score? I think they could probably do a better job explaining it to me.
I don't know. I mean, I've always just assumed it's when people get tired taking it. Like if it's long questions, long words, lots of pages.
I think it's particularly around like long words. Like if you have a really long question or really long answers, maybe it's not accessibility. Like maybe you don't have it in a matrices, but if every response requires them to read, 500 characters, then that's going to add to the fatigue.
It also has to do with the open text, the amount of open text questions you have.
Yeah.
So this is good if you want to check in to see how the computer has analyzed your survey and better understand how the experience might be for somebody. And they do a really good job, I found, estimating the length of time it takes for somebody to take the survey. Okay, so getting back to email campaigns. So this share, we're going moving over to this share section. This is your primary survey link. You can customize it to change the name. And I think what ends up customizing is just this last bit. You can't get rid of the survey.alchemer. I've never used the select a survey audience. Has anyone used that before?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any folks? Okay. Not our audience.
it's for marketing,
this-
wide marketing. Yeah, we don't use it for that.
One of the most often and wonderful tools that Alchemer offers is this email campaign. Let's call it the best email campaign. That's what we're going to call this one. So we're going to create an email campaign. And what it does is send it out on a schedule to people to complete the survey. And each contact you send it to, like we talked about earlier, will get a unique link. And you will know when they've clicked on it and when they've completed the survey, when they've completed it partially, letters they've received, if their email address works. And you can do that all here in this email campaign section. So once you open it, just defaults to a standard email. So you go here to edit and you can change the name, all this information. You can insert different fields like their first name. So it'll tailor to, hello, Wendy. We're about to take the survey. We want you to take it. Here's the link to click it. You can even include the first question in the survey, which sometimes people get drawn into. Like you can say, you can just include the very first question. And then once they click submit, it takes them to the survey so that they can submit the rest of it. Yes. Great. You can tailor all this, change the name of it. You can change the style so it looks like your brand. Plain text backup. That's if somebody doesn't receive. I'm not sure about HTML stuff. Like they can't receive button looking things, so they can just receive plain text. So you want to make sure that they just get a plain text. So maybe double check that what you're saying here is the same as what you're saying here. Unless somebody wants to correct me, I might be wrong about that.
And Afton, is this what we used for Safe Sport to track each LAO, each local athletic organization to track that they all, okay, great. So that was incredibly helpful because we had a certain number that we needed of LAOs across the nation. And so then Afton was able to track them and send them reminders. Pat has a question.
Oh,
go ahead, Pat.
After you're done, Lexi.
Oh, I'm done. That was it.
So with this would be really important that no one else can get into our campaign, because this then eliminates anonymity pretty much. I mean, because we know what people answer, who, which is their thing. So, I mean, you have to be super careful here. Like with Idaho, I saw the two people who didn't answer it and go, okay, that makes sense. They were less close to the work and I'm not going to worry about, those folks. The other thing is we found even with the boxes or the information, Wendy, that you suggested to make their emails or prompt their emails to accept it, we did have folks, it went into their junk mail and we warned people to look in your junk mail. Like we sent them something, we just sent you a survey, look in your junk mail. And so it did go in some people's junk mail, and there were a couple people who said they never got it. Like it could be that their company or organizations, screened it out so much that it never even got to their computer. So there was, Afton had to send them their email via a regular email and not automated. So it might have helped, but there was still a lot of cleaning. And then it's nice because you can send reminders just to folks who didn't get it, but there was a lot of, follow-up for a very, very tiny sample. There was an inordinate amount of follow-up, maybe because it was such a small sample and we needed, everyone to answer. But it was nice to see where people were.
Yeah, I don't
hopefully
think
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was waiting for somebody else to respond.
I was just gonna say, I don't think it's a secret. I'm a huge fan of email campaigns because, you put in the hours up front and then you don't have to think about it much again. Like, of course, there's like a couple things you should always check for if you're the one running the survey. To Pat's point, like you always have to check to see if there's bounce backs. And there's a whole, again, Afton can do a whole run through, or I can't, somebody, we can have a whole workshoppy or how we do what we do on just email campaigns. It would probably be a good idea. It is something that we should be using a lot of, and it does take a little bit of manual management, but every survey does. So you have to check to see if there's bounced emails, fixed address errors, that there always are typos in email addresses. Monitor just the rates of response coming in, see if you need to add one more reminder. But aside from that, it is well worth our time setting up the campaign ahead of time, and then you don't have to put anything on the calendar as far as reminders, for example.
Yeah, and I just wanted to Pat's point about the bounce backs. We on the back end, I think you did, Wendy, at some point, put in this strategic prevention
Yes.
solutions email. So that should have resolved a lot of them. But like you said, there's just some that will naturally bounce back until I don't know enough about it to know why. So this is the default, always in the advanced settings. You don't have to mess with this, but it's there. There are some other options here. I wanted to show what it looks like when you, so you can have your email set up to go out a certain date. You can add a reminder email that goes out 3 days later or on a certain date. And then you can add a thank you message that folks receive once they've completed the survey. But I wanted to show you what it looked like. I hope it's okay, Pat. I pulled the email campaign that we got back just so you could see Acton. I sent it to my address as a test. You can see that I clicked on it. You can see the date that I received the initial one, what date I received a reminder, and my invite link. So you can go into individual contacts. If they're not receiving it, they can't get it. You're like, what's going on? I don't know. I'm just going to send it to you directly. So you can go get their invite link and just copy this link and send it to them directly. And then they will have access to that specific survey link, can go change it, take their time, go in,
Yes.
edit it, do whatever they want. So that's how you get it. And the way that you get this CSV is over here in delivery statistics. It's this button here, export contacts with send status. So you've created your campaign, you've added your context, and Emily and I can help you do that. You send your campaign for a date and you schedule it for tomorrow. And then everyone fills it out, and this is who you can see who you need to follow up with. And their email addresses are, actually, I should take that back. The computer system automatically sends it to people who are not responding. Once they've responded, they don't get the reminder messages at all. It's just the people who have not responded yet who get those.
And there's a whole kind of craft to the wording you use for the subject headline or the subject line, to the wording you use for reminder emails. Like, for example, I highly recommend you don't just copy paste all the reminders, they look the same, because people tune it out, and like, don't make your subject line super salesy, like once in a lifetime chance to give your feedback on this training. Like, that's going to go in people's junk mail immediately. Just if the system doesn't do it, they're going to do it mentally. Be like, I'm not going to do that. It's a marketing thing, So like, there's a whole craft to like the kinds of words you use to invite people in and to remind them. I've had a lot of success, for example, with like, and the industry's kind of best practices, no more than 3-4 tops reminders, like on average 3 reminders. But you could do 4. I've had a lot of success with the final reminder to actually put in the subject line final chance or last chance, which is kind of salesy, but it's enough salesy that it doesn't go in the can and it hooks them enough to be like, oh no, it's, for all the procrastinators out there, oh, let's wait till the end. They finally get worried about it, and then they take it, and you get a big spike at the very end when you tell people it's their actual last chance.
Do you want to talk really quickly, Wendy, about selecting 3 days later versus a specific date to send the reminder? Because sometimes you could be selecting something like 5 days after you send the initial email out, you send a reminder
Yes.
email, but the reminder email could come
Yes.
on a Saturday morning.
Yes, thank you. That's we should definitely talk about that. If you are, and it's most important that Afton and Emily and Tiana, once you get more on board, and out, anybody who is like our research associate support staff needs to know this, because it really impacts you as you're setting up email campaigns. But in case anyone, the rest of us are doing this, the most important part of an email campaign seems to be the launch date of the survey. Okay, so when you open the survey. So because of that, it's very helpful to make all of your communication and email campaign relative to the start date of the survey or opening of the survey. Do not schedule your reminders to go out on specific dates. When we had this happen once, when we got ahead of ourselves, and the survey basically was launched before, but it was launched later than we had thought we were going to launch it, because we were making last minute edits, like often happens. But we had already set up an email campaign, but unfortunately the reminders had specific dates and times. And so all of a sudden, because, so if you imagine, here's the 7 days, right? We thought we were going to launch it here, and then a reminder was here. Well, we launched it here. Well, we don't need a reminder one day after we already sent them the initial invite, right? That looks bad. And then you're reminding them over and over, so we immediately canceled all the dates and made it all relative to the launch date, which he's showing you right here. So every message should be relative a certain number of days after the previous message. And then you can get a sense of, and then the pressure's off. So then you can wait as long as you want to launch the survey. Nobody's going to get, reminder emails for a survey that doesn't exist yet, for example. It just saves a lot of stress on our part to make everything relative to that launch date or last send. Does that cover what you
Yeah, I
wanted to
pulled it
share, Afton?
Yeah, and I was just going to remind too, just to make sure that you have in your head. So once you're scheduling these, just to make sure it doesn't go out on a Saturday. So select 5 days after send, and then somebody gets it on a Saturday, and then they don't get to it till Monday because things gets kind of lost in it. So just be mindful of when you send it, how you send how many days, and what calendar date that'll actually fall on. Any other thoughts on that?
Just that you may not be able to control it sometimes. So sometimes they will go out on a Saturday or Sunday or an inopportune time. And that's not the end of the world. That if they do miss it and they don't get to it when they come back to the office, then they'll get another reminder email.
Okay. Do we have enough time to talk a little bit about data cleaning? You think? We haven't talked at all about results, but I wanted to bring you here to, there's 2 areas that you might find useful, which is to analyze open text answers. I think at some point we're going to talk a little bit more about deduce at the retreat. Does that sound right?
Yes. Yes.
So that's going to be a tool that's going to be way more powerful than this. But if you have quick and dirty, I'm going to pick a different survey, and Lexi gave me permission to use the map survey. So I'm going to just show you what that looks like. Okay. You can pick a question, analyze responses over here. So then you can create what's called text buckets, and everyone that said it's fun. Some people said, I like it.
I'm pretty sure no one said that about the map survey.
Nope. It's a real drag. So anyway, as you're reading these,
reporting the end. Yeah.
The regulatory body should not also be in prevention. Okay, so you can, as you scroll through these, you can just create oh, this person said, I'm a gymnastic who's under a C4. I like it. That's not what they said. This person said it's fun. So you can see not many people answered this open-ended question, but you can go through and pocket into all of yours so that you quantitize.
Good
That's
word.
a new word. I love
I
it.
like it. I want to
Yeah.
qualitize everything now.
It's awesome.
You can quantize your open-ended
Qualify.
questions and create
Quantify.
qualify.
Qualify.
I
Or
mean,
you're
that's
turning
the
it into
opposite of
quantity
quantify.
data.
But
You're quantify.
I like
You're
qualitize.
quantifying it.
It sounds more
Okay.
powerful.
Add that to the appendix. Okay, so we're not going to go through 1,000 responses. There's 45 pages of this, but you can see how if you had like 20 responses, you didn't want to open up deduce. That's a little more robust than you need. You just need to like create a quick, like, what do people say? It's fun or they like it? You can do that in Alchemer itself. And then when you go to the report page, it'll create a graph based on how people responded or how you bucketed things.
This is a wonderful tip, Afton. I think it's going to work really well for our ANDVSA pro workplace family policy surveys, which Ray and I got a little too excited and added way more open-ended questions than we should have. And now I'm like, how do I do all of this without deduce? So whoops on my part, but also this is going to be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And then the last thing is if you have, in this case, we had 1,000+ responses and some of those were random bots and some of them were just people clicking on it and doing nothing. You can go to this quarantine bad responses and it, here, let me just
Can
walk
we
you through
view
really
your
quickly.
list?
So you can, yeah, let's do that instead. No, it started over as soon as I clicked the button. So you can bet anything, anytime somebody spends, they're just so quick. They just quickly go through the survey. You can like, if somebody does straight lining where they just answer B the whole way down, you know that's maybe not a bad. So in this case, 762 instances, but that's not necessarily, you don't maybe want to quarantine those because they may truly were feeling like super excited or super just, I don't know, whatever. So you want to take that out because you don't want to quarantine 672 responses. So you can go through and mess with it. You want all these red herrings out of there, get them out, all the consistency check, you want to get them out. You want everyone to answer a certain way. I'm just going to skip it for now so we can view our list. Yeah, so that looks like it's a legit survey response. So I don't want to quarantine that. So I can't remember how to do it. Restore. I'm going to restore it. Okay, now it's out. So yeah, they just answered the first question and they didn't do anything else. So yeah, we're going to get rid of that. You're out. Trash.
Now, Afton, before you just delete all of them, when you run your analysis, you can control whether it includes quarantined responses. So the safest way to still keep all the data, like let's say Afton's having a bad day and she's grumpy. She's like, oh, this jerk, yeah, look at all these quarantine people, and she just wants to get rid of all of them. Like then we lose the possibility that somebody just straight line, but they really were neutral on everything, but it was a real response and they had good open-ended at the very end, right? But how would Afton have known that unless she looked at each individual survey and went all the way to the end, which is very time consuming. So it is also helpful to know that you can, like, as long as they're quarantined, they won't impact your analysis.
Yeah.
But I rarely actually delete a survey response because of the fear that at some point that might have actually been it. Like, what if we had tested the Idaho survey and like we actually used one of the director's test responses, we converted it to their actual survey responses because they had actually answered genuinely and then ran out of time to actually complete the real survey. So she's like, just use what I did for the test. Well, if Afton had gone in and deleted all the test responses, we wouldn't have had any of her data. So we saved her a few hours of time, honestly, by keeping her test response and just flagging it, coding it as a test response, which is part of what I really love with Alchemer. They allow you to filter all these different statuses of survey responses instead of just deleting them.
Yeah, thank you. Don't delete. Sorry.
I mean, you can
what do you
delete,
think
but just
you
be
did?
careful.
You did do what for Idaho? You deleted responses, or you disqualified or quarantined them?
Well, we sent the test link to all of to their staff who are working with us on the survey development. And one of the staff like actually took it very seriously and answered the questions. Like most people just go blah, 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 you know, to test the open it, but she actually answered the questions as she was testing it. And then when it came time to administer the survey, we noticed she was the only person really who hadn't completed the survey, one of the few who hadn't completed it. We're like, what's going on? Like, why? She's a main partner. Why wouldn't she complete the survey? But that she had personal stuff that had kept her out of work. And so she ran out of time. Essentially, we said, oh, we really need your feedback. You're a main person. And she said, well, I answered in the test survey. Can you just use those? And thankfully, we still had that data because it was still coded as test survey. But I think Afton went in and like changed the status to an actual survey response and not a test response. So it was included in the analysis that Afton and Pat were doing.
Yeah, and I think you might have sent her am I making this up? Did you send her answers, or we offered to send her answers just so she could double?
You
check
did.
them?
You offered to send her the answers to double check. I think you did actually send her.
I can't remember,
the
but one
answers.
could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just really quickly, the difference between, I don't think quarantined are by default filtered out of the report. I think you have to disqualify them in order to
Okay.
filter them out, and then you can select disqualify. Because right now they're just quarantined. They're in a little space. They're like, what do you want to do with these? Then you can go through and
Right.
analyze them to make sure that you want to actually pull them out of the report, in which case you would, yeah, exactly. It's like a limbo. It's a little, they're in the bad section, but they are still there. They're just like in their own section.
This is actually, I've done this when there's more than one of us analyzing the survey. It can be helpful to divide the workload a little bit. So if like Afton is managing the survey, like managing a survey for project I'm the lead on, like she can go in and do the initial data cleaning like she just showed us and quarantine things, right? And then I could go in and read the ones that are quarantined and decide whether they should actually be DQ'd, disqualified or not. So that's a nice way to work in teams where it maintains the status in the system and then somebody else can log in and then figure out the final set to analyze.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think what Brittany just posted though is opposite of what I said. So I'm wrong. I think it says quarantined responses are automatically filtered out of your reports, right, Brittany? That's what you just found?
That's what it looks like in the
Okay.
Alchemer help tab. So I think when you do the reports tab, it will automatically include anything that's partial or complete. But anything that's flagged as disqualified or a test, I think it doesn't include. Or if you have used this disqualified thing, it won't include it.
Well, and that's true. And the quarantining feature, I could be mistaken, but I think that only is a feature that's deployed if you clean your data.
Right.
Yes.
So a lot of us, I don't think necessarily clean the data, and we should be. We should be using these tools that Alchemer provides. They're very robust, awesome tools. We should always click that data cleaning tool to see what it picks up because it's a computer, right? Like it picks up patterns. Like, isn't that interesting to learn all the ways people try to fake surveys, right? Like if it can pick up if somebody literally drew on a survey, like, you know, like a tree, a Christmas tree pattern, like very much, not so much, well, very much, like it picks that up, and that would not be very obvious to my eye. Manually reading a survey, it would look like good variation on answers, right? But it can tell if it's in a pattern of a star or whatever, and then flags it for you. Lexi's good at cleaning all the surveys.
That was not sarcasm. That was,
No, I know. I love
legitimately
going through
giving you a
and
compliment.
quarantine. Get out of here, zombies. Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Yes. Too many CDC trips, I guess, for me.
Time. I'm sorry. I think we made it through most of the things. So we can, what elements we want to continue going in a little bit deeper at the retreat. But apologies for going over 5 minutes. I hope it was useful.
Thanks, Afton. Before we head out, could people just put in the chat what topics they would really like Afton to cover during the retreat as like a part 2? Because we are going to talk, we'll have some more time in person to pull some of these things up. If anything's burning for you now, please put it in the chat. Otherwise, just get back to her as soon as possible with what you'd like to see. So I think if it's okay, Afton, I'd really like to still keep that time on the schedule, and then we could make it like this, where it's like a workshoppy time. So it's not so much pressure on you.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. At first, I was thinking another hour and a half on Alchemer, but now I understand that we probably could spend another hour, especially this group, too.
Yeah, especially with
The whole
reporting
time.
and cleaning. Like, yeah, let's get into the other side of the survey. Like, how do we clean it, analyze it, report it? Templates. Maybe we should decide some templates at the retreat. That'd be nice. Like report templates. That'd be cool.
Yeah, great.
Forever.
Oh,
Thank you, Afton. This was very helpful.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Afton.
thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy Monday.
Welcome
Bye.
back.
All right. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
All right, take care.
Thanks.